I appreciate it. All right, so first, before we start, how many of you are currently managing multilingual content? Can I see some hands? Wow, amazing. All right, so I want to be upfront about something. Today, I'm not going to tell you AI is amazing, use it everywhere. And I'm also not going to tell you AI is dangerous, be careful. What I am going to do is I'm going to show you what works and what doesn't based on what actual companies are doing nowadays. Now, to start, I want to show you something I recently came across with. This is how an actual product listing was showing on a major retail platform. I mean, yeah, screenshots are recreated. But we have skin jacket for women. The correct version should have been leather jacket for women. I mean, technically it's not wrong. You know, leather does come from skin. But at least to a native speaker, this sounds off. Something more in these lines. And this is live. It's live on a platform that generates billions in global sales. So here's a question. Does this cost you sales? If you're the cheapest option out there, maybe not. You know, price does cover a lot. But if you're competing on brand reputation, on quality, on excellence, this signals distance. It signals that this brand doesn't really care about my market. And if the local competitors sound native and you sound like a bot, that's a competitive disadvantage. So this isn't really whether the translation is wrong or not, but it's what standard are you willing to accept? Because the AI will scale whatever standard you set. So let's see how to decide well. This will be our agenda for today. We will start by talking on where we are on the AI cycle, and also very briefly on what localization is. Next, we will talk about uses of AI, particularly for translation, and on how we can implement AI in a way that is safe, that protects our brand. And finally, we will connect all of this back to multilingual content, to local visibility, SEO, GEO. Let's get started. So, first, quick reality check. Perhaps you're aware, this is called the Gartner hype cycle. We've seen this pattern before in blockchain, metaverse. In 2023, ChatGPT was the trigger. Expectations exploded. AI is going to replace humans. We don't need humans anymore. That was the peak of inflated expectations. And now we're around here, in the trough of disillusionment. Companies are realizing that what worked in a demo doesn't necessarily work in scale. That what worked in English doesn't necessarily work in Korean, in Japanese. The good news is that this is where real value starts. Less hype, real processes, real use cases. Now, even though we're past this peak, expectations haven't really changed. Haven't you heard something in these lines in the past year or so? Why can't we just use ChatGPT? We need to cut costs by 30%. Why does this take so long? Particularly in teams involved in multilingual content, they're caught in a squeeze between more content, more languages, tighter turnaround times, but at the same time, less resources, same quality expectations. So now what we gotta do is we gotta figure out how to use AI in a way that speeds things up, that makes the process more efficient, but at the same time, that protects our brand. All right, and now let's go very briefly through what localization is, because many times translation and localization are kind of used interchangeably. And actually, translation focuses on language. It focuses on the linguistic aspect. But localization is actually much more complex. It involves around 5 main layers. It does involve the language aspect, so the translation aspect, but it also involves the cultural aspects and the user experience and the user behavior in each market, and the legal and regulatory elements which vary from market to market, and of course, local visibility. It's quite complex. Take a look at this example. This is, perhaps you know it, the Stanley thermos. We can see a product from Argentina over here. This is in Spanish. Notice the language. Notice the currency. Notice the units of measurement. Notice the visual elements. In Argentina, when we think of a thermos, we think of a mate. Perhaps you know it, perhaps not. It's a very traditional drink from Argentina, and it's used by the best in the world. And then look at the version on the other side of the US version. Different currency, different units of measurement. The visuals are different because in the US, people associate a thermos with coffee. This is what localization is about. Let's see another example. McDonald's homepage. Version on the top is from Thailand. Version on the bottom is from the UK. Notice on the Thai version, these cute aesthetics, which is very typical. Or notice all of the visual information. And now compare it to the version on the bottom. Much more simple, much more minimalistic. Also, what localization is about. Localization is about making people feel at home. It's about making people feel they're being addressed, being talked to, being seen. And AI can support every layer of localization, but it can't own any of them. Humans are still an important part of the process. We need humans because they have the context. They have the knowledge, the cultural knowledge. Okay, and now let's start talking about uses of AI, particularly for translation. So, the big question, is AI translation alone enough? And to answer this, I want to share a story with you. Last year, I traveled to Bulgaria. I went there for a conference. First night there, I'm exhausted from the travel. I opened Glovo, you know, the food ordering app, and everything was in Bulgarian. I speak English, I speak Spanish, a little bit of Italian, zero Bulgarian. And I'm vegetarian, so I can't just look at the pictures and try to figure out what looks best. So I'm there scrolling, quite frustrated, and I'm about to just close the app and go outside to buy when I saw it. The machine translation button. Suddenly, everything was in English. I could navigate. And yeah, things weren't perfect. I remember that the word vegetables was translated as plants, which is not ideal, but you know, it makes sense. So I got the point. So I ordered, food arrived, Silvi was happy, and that's when it hit me. Without that imperfect translation, Glovo would have lost a client, but with it, they made a sale. So, AI translation can be enough, right? Now, in fact, according to research conducted by Common Sense Advisory, approximately 65% of shoppers prefer buying in their native language, even if it's imperfect, even if it's of poor quality. So perfection wasn't really the point, access was. But now, here's another question. When is good enough not good enough? That global example worked basically because in that context it made sense. But what about when a translation represents your brand or a legal product? What about when it can damage your reputation? Let's see some examples. Perhaps you're aware that last year YouTube launched a feature where it automatically dubbed all of the video's voices and translated descriptions and meta descriptions into whatever language you had set in your browser. This video is called Mundial de Facturas, ¿cuál es la más rica? And it's a video about tasting pastries. The correct version, the correct translation, should have been something like World Cup of croissants, which is the tastiest, but the AI gave us World of invoices, which is the richest. Because the word ricas and the word facturas can mean different things based on the context. And by the way, this feature was really difficult to turn off. So what happened was that creators felt misrepresented. Users felt frustrated. Another example. The word fair can mean different things based on the context. It can refer to something that is just. Sorry. Okay, back. It can refer to something that is just. It can refer to something that is acceptable. It can refer to a festival. Or it can also refer to a light skin tone. In the context of a hair laser machine, the word fair, which was meant to refer to a light skin tone, was translated as acceptable. Not only is this offensive, but it reinforces harmful ideas. It's not just a translation error, but it can damage your brand. So, and by the way, super quick note here. AI has been present in translation for a long time. Before, we had neural machine translation with engines like Google Translate or with DeepL. These engines, they're more fixed, they're more predictable, but sometimes they may be a little bit too literal. And then now we have LLMs with engines like ChatGPT or Claude. They are more flexible, more creative, but sometimes they can produce more errors, hallucinations, additions. Now, I wouldn't say that one is better than the other. They're actually great. They both have their advantages. They both have their own risks. It's important to keep in mind the risks. And I always recommend doing tests, seeing what kind of results it gets for your content types. Okay, and now let's see how we can implement AI into our processes. Okay, in order to protect our brand, something that we can do is implement a content tiering framework. This framework basically proposes that not all of your content has the same value or the same kind of risk for your company. So something that you can do is you can categorize your content based on different criteria. For example, you can keep tier number 1 for your high risk or high visibility content. For this kind of content, maybe you can use the AI to create the initial draft, but then you have a human validate the output. Because the cost of an error is simply too high. A human has to own the output, has to be responsible for the output. Tier number 2 is for your medium risk, mid visibility content. So for content that is important, has visibility, but perhaps the stakes are lower than for tier number 1. For this kind of content, you run it through the AI, and then you have a human validate the output. This workflow is typically called machine translation post-editing. And then you have tier number 3, which is for your low risk, low visibility content. For this kind of content, you run everything through the AI, and then optionally, you can do some spot checks. This workflow is ideal for your internal documentation or for your user-generated content, for example. This is what a translation workflow typically looks like. I won't go through each one of the steps, but what I do want to highlight from this is that what mature teams are doing nowadays is they don't have one workflow for all of their content type, but they route the content based on different criteria, based on SEO value, based on risk for your company, based on your company's value. In the QR code on the screen, you can download a copy of this framework. I won't be spamming you, by the way. This just contains information with a thorough explanation of how it works with the workflow. But what's key about this framework is that it is your framework to adapt based on your company, based on your industry, based on your tolerance for risk. But this is how you scale without losing control. And now, something that is very important, if you use AI in your process, someone has to be accountable for the AI. Someone has to decide, someone has to classify the content, to decide when to use humans, when not, to decide what good enough means for your company. Who will be responsible for this in your organization? Okay, and now let's connect all of this to local visibility. So, what drives local visibility? This room is full of marketers. By now we understand that SEO and GEO go hand in hand. Basically, the same fundamentals apply whether you want to show up on search results or whether you want to show up on AI. Now, according to a research conducted by Weglot this year, where they analyzed over 1.2 million AI citations, they found that translated sites gain about 3 times more visibility in AI results than untranslated sites. I would take this as directional, not universal, but I do think it supports an important point, which is multilingual content creates more entry points for AIs to cite your brands. This is the visibility wheel. The way it works is, first, you have localized content that answers local queries. This leads to search and AI finding your content. And therefore, you get more traffic and more engagement. People interact more with your site. This sends authority signals, and these authority signals make it more likely that AI and search engines will cite your site again. So it becomes a loop. Better localized content leads to more engagement, and more engagement to more authority, and your site's cited again. A few things to keep in mind. First, using local language. Someone trying to buy this piece of clothing in the US would probably type for something like buy sweater. Someone trying to buy the same product in the UK or in Australia would type for buy jumper. Same happens across languages. In Latin America, someone would search for comprar suéter. In Spain, for comprar jersey. Same product, same language, different way of searching. Same happens with user intent. Someone trying to buy this product in the US, a security camera, would buy it for convenience, to see if a package arrived, to see what the dog is doing. But in Spain, someone would buy it for security, because in Spain there's a lot of illegal occupation, a lot of ocupas. So the reason behind the search also changes. And last, local authority. Local authority is something we have to work on. 3 things that send local authority signals include content signals, so producing local content, reputation signals, reviews, testimonials from local sites, and links, link signals, mentions, backlinks from local sites. We have to build authority for each market we want to target. So, Translation makes a product understandable, accessible. Localization makes a product familiar, trustworthy. And local authority makes a product discoverable by AI and by humans. Okay, and now we're almost finished. I just want to leave you with 3 pieces of advice. Recommendation number 1. If you use AI in your process, be transparent about it. Let your audience know that you're using AI. How? You can do this by means of automatic disclaimers, by means of pop-ups, many different ways to do it. But this is what turns an error from, this brand doesn't care about me, to okay, this is auto-translated. Recommendation number 2, do market research before launching into a new market. So many times I hear companies say, I want to expand into Spain because the CEO speaks Spanish. Or because last year I traveled to Spain with my family and we had such an amazing time and Spanish sounds so lovely, so we want to expand into Spain. You could be missing out on so many great opportunities. 4 things you can focus on. The market. What is the economic stability? Are there barriers to entry? The audience. What are their buying habits? What are their pain points? What languages do they speak? Because in Spain, Spanish is not the only language. The product fit. Is there a demand for your products or for your services? Are people willing to pay? And finally, the competition. What are their strengths? What are their strategies? What are their weaknesses? All of this groundwork will save you time and money later. And 3rd piece of recommendation, don't report words, report impact. So many times I hear someone report, we translated 80,000 words last quarter. Nobody cares about that. Translate the results into whatever language the stakeholders speak. For marketing, it's the number of leads, it's the traffic. For sales, it's conversions. For leadership, it's the amount of clients. This is what turns a translation from a cost center to a growth impact, to a growth tool. So super quick recap, almost finished. Number 1, assign AI ownership. Someone has to define how to use AI in the translation workflow. 2, tailor your content. Remember that not all of it has the same importance or the same risk. 3rd, define workflows. Where humans are needed, where are they not? 4th, work on local visibility. Create local content, build your local authority. And 5, start small, test, do some pilots, and then scale. Okay, and now we've reached the end of the presentation. If your company is facing any of these challenges, if you just want to keep the conversation going, feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn or via email. I'm quite passionate about this topic, so I would love to talk about it. Thank you so much.